Hello, you amazing people. It is Riley LH here with another video, and we are back with the turbo-ish Miata. And you guys are probably tired of me saying that, and you guys just want a turbo in it, and we're getting very close. So, in last episode, we went and made our intercooler brackets, and now we have an intercooler in the car, but now we actually need our piping to come off of it. Now, I can't do all the piping on this side because the factor of I don't have the compressor side of my turbo. It's coming back from powder coating, but we can at least get up to about here, and we can do all of our intake side. Parts-wise, I got a kit off eBay. I think it was like anywhere from $50 to $100 is a really good price. We get a bunch of aluminum piping, we got a bunch of cheap silicone couplers, and a bunch of hose clamps as well. But, like I said, we have a bunch of cheap silicone couplers, and that's prone to have a lot of boost leaks. So what we're going to do to fix that is get a pair of wire snippers, and we're going to chop the front of it off, because you can see right there that has that little indentation. And on most good pipes, they have a bead roll like this here. But if we're going and chopping up this piping, we're going to get rid of our bead roll. So having no bead roll plus crappy silicone piping equals lots and lots of boost leaks. So we're going to go chop the front of this off and make our own bead rolling tool. Instead of spending a couple $100s, we can just go in here, clamp it, move on, clamp it, move on, clamp it, clamp it, clamp it. It's going to be very time consuming, but I think this was like not even $10, so we're saving a lot of money. So let's hope this works, but first we have to actually mock up the piping. So let's go ahead and take everything out, figure out what all piping we have and what all bins we have. Okay, so we actually have a lot more than I expected. For how cheap this kit was on eBay, which I will link in the description down below, we got a lot of really good stuff. So we have these cheap hose clamps and stuff, which aren't the best, but hey, they'll work, and if need be, we can always go to a parts store and just get actual normal hose clamps. But I'm kind of curious to test and see how well these work. We have two 180s, two 90s, two 45s, and two straight bits. As well, we have 290 silicone piping and 6 straight silicone hoses. Now, yes, I do already have one on the car because I wanted to make sure it fits my intake, but there's 6 in total. Now, I already do have a plan of what I'm going to do. I'm going to go down with a 90, go straight down with a straight piece, have a silicone 90 go over, and then go in with the 90, and then go with a straight silicone bit going into that 90 there. And pretty much the same for the other side, which I should have enough piping for all that. But that's not the only things I got. Again, I have the wire strippers for the bead rolling tool, but I also have a barbed fitting, and I have an assortment of MPT taps. Now the reason I have this barbed fitting is because I am keeping my idle air control valve. It's something I can always delete in the future, but I'm going to try keeping it, and that barbed fitting fits perfectly in there, and we're simply just going to tap that into our intercooler piping. As well, we have this intake air temperature sensor, which either we're going to tap into the intercooler itself, or we're going to put about right there-ish. The reason I tap it into the intercooler itself is just to prevent heat soaking. When it's under here in the engine bay, it can heat soak a lot and give you wrong readings. So I'm going to do a little bit of more research and decide that later on, but this is also another MPT fitting. So if you're building your own custom turbo setup, I would suggest just getting an assortment of NPT taps. One thing that will make a turbo project go on for crazy long, especially when you're doing all the work yourself, is that just the parts you have to order. There's always more parts that you're not expecting you need. For instance, these taps, you overlook having a bunch of NPT taps, and then you need one specific size, so you order that. That takes 2 to 3 days to come in. Then you find out you need another MPT tap that comes and is another 2 to 3 days to come in. I think this was like $20 or $30 on Amazon. Has a bunch of sizes of MPT taps, and I would just recommend getting them now and not going through the same frustration as me. Okay, but let's actually get started. So we're going to start off with the 90. I'm probably actually going to take this 180 and cut it pretty much straight down the center, instead of wasting one of those, because those I can pretty much use in these areas perfectly. Because I don't want to waste those just yet, because they will work perfectly in that area. So for now, we're going to start with this, cut it straight down the middle, and then go from there. To do most of these cuts, I'm going to be using a cold cut saw, and now yes, you can just use an angle grinder that will work just as well. This is just a little bit easier, and I have the tool, so why not use it? So let's chuck on a glove, and we'll go ahead and hold and cut this. Okay, so we have it in the cold cut saw, and we're just simply just gonna... Okay, so now that we actually have it cut, we're just simply going to file down these edges and test fit it. And yes, make sure you file down these edges. You don't want to be that guy who pulls off his intercooler piping and splits his finger open. So now that we have this piece, we're going to test fit it in the car. And that fits beautifully, and honestly looks really good. That just makes me so excited to get this car boosted. Now, it's a little bit long. You can see when it's completely flush that it doesn't fully clear the sway bar, so we're going to go ahead and just cut it a little bit shorter. So we got that piece a little bit shorter. Now we're going to go ahead and take this 90-degree bend. We're going to chuck it on here. And then we're simply just going to put this on. Now the one thing with going and using that 180 piece is that bend was so shallow that that a lot of my cut is in the bend to be able to go and get it as tucked up as possible. Now we have the intercooler piping coming down off the intake pretty much done, and we're going to come down to the bottom of the car and go from that coupler back into the intercooler. Okay, so we're going to take this other part of the 90-degree elbow, and we're going to try to wiggle that into here, and hope that this is long enough. Okay, so I actually flipped it around and have this shorter cut piece right here, and that has to be reduced by like 2.5 inches, about 3 inches, so we're going to go ahead and pull this out, cut it one more time, and then we'll be able to cut this piece off the intercooler into it. Okay, like always, we're going to go ahead and file this down and then get it back on the car. So I actually got that pipe fitting up perfectly, so now we're just simply going to cut this pipe, if I can get it in there, here, and then we'll go ahead and just chuck some silicone couplers on it, and that will be our intake side of the intercooler done, besides drilling and tapping and all that good stuff, but you get what I'm saying. With these silicone couplers, you do want to leave a little bit of wiggle room so you have some flex in it, but you don't want it being right on the edge of the coupler, so I tend to leave about a pin's width of gap between where I want it. So we're going to mark right there. Okay, so now we just go ahead and cut this, and then we can test fit it back on the car, and hopefully that will fit up first time. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and cut this piece. Okay, so now that we have this side cut, we're now going to cut this side. And as always, we go and file down the edges. Alright, now we're just going to chuck some silicone piping on it and hook it up. And now we have our intake side of the intercooler piping done. Now I do need to test and make sure my wheel is not going to hit it at full lock. And once we test that, we can go ahead and bead roll it, but first, before we go and bead roll it, I'm going to test it and then do the other side, and then I'll bead roll it all at one time. So instead of buying some expensive bead rolling tool, what we got is a pair of wire crimpers. And we're just simply going to chop the front part of this off, and we have a bead rolling tool with that little notch right there. We simply just go around and pinch it. So let's go ahead and chuck this in the vise and chop this front portion off. I got these for like $10 on Amazon, so much cheaper than the normal couple $100 for a decent bead roller. And now, yes, this isn't going to be as fun to use. It's going to be a lot more manual labor than a bead rolling tool, but it works, and it's cheap. So, we'll make it work. Okay, so now we have our own $10 bead rolling tool. So we're just going to let this cool down so we don't burn that really crap out of ourselves, and go ahead and start bead rolling this pipe. Okay, so now it's time to actually bead roll the piping. So we're simply just going to go put the tool in there, about yay far, and compress it. And now we do that about 100 billion times. So like 15 minutes later, I got all the piping done, and you can see it's not great, but it's not horrible. It'll work. It's not like anybody's ever going to see this. And the important part is that it works. But if we compare that to the first bit I did, you can see this is definitely horrible. And as well, you can see this inside edge is pushed in. And how I fix that is I grinded down the middle of this, which also made it a lot easier to push it down because I wasn't trying to push all of this down. I was simply just pushing that area down. So I went from that to this. And they both should work. So now we have to drill and tap the piping for our intake air temperature sensor and our idle air control valve, which we don't technically need, but I just feel like running it for simplicity reasons. And you can see when we've chucked back on the intercooler piping, it's a lot harder to get on there, which means it's doing its job. So let's get everything back in so we can mark where we want everything, and then we can go ahead and start drilling and tapping the piping. Okay, so now that we have our intercooler piping back in, we can simply just figure out where we want everything and mark it. So we're going to take our barbed fitting, and we're going to go ahead and slide this onto the piping for our idle air control valve. And now this piping is the stock piping, which I simply just rotated. And now we mark where we want this. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and drill and tap that. So we have our center point marked, so we're going to go ahead and tap that. And now we can go ahead and start drilling it. Okay, now we have drilled it with the standard bit. We can go ahead and put it on our stepper bit and step up to the size that we need to tap this with. Okay, so now we can go ahead and tap this. Okay, so now that we have that tapped, we can actually install our fitting. Now with the tap, you're only supposed to go about halfway. I went in a little bit over halfway, like 60 to 70% of the way in with the tap, and that's because I want the fitting itself to be a little bit more flush on the pipe. So let's go ahead and file down this edge, get our fitting, and put that in. Now for installing this, we want to use Teflon tape or liquid Teflon. I'm all out of liquid Teflon, so we're just going to use Teflon tape. So we're going to take our Teflon tape and go ahead and wrap this. It's just like wrapping literally anything else in Teflon tape. Now I'm not going to do the bottom threads for the simple factor of I don't need to do them. They're going to be in the pipe. So we're just going to do these top threads. Okay, now that we've done 3 to 4 wraps around with Teflon tape, it's time to actually install it. So we're going to go ahead and start threading it in. And you can see how smoothly this threads in. We can get it most of the way in with our hands. Now we're going to use a pretty big wrench because it's the only wrench that I have that will fit on this, and let's go ahead and crank this down. You want to make sure that the Teflon is actually reaching in all the threads and that it's showing everywhere. Because we definitely don't want any boost leaks because boost leaks equal less power. Okay, so now that we have that in and tightened up, we can go ahead and chuck it back in the car. Okay, so now we can chuck this back in the car, and if we notice any boost leak issues, what we can do is we can use RTV on it. Or if we're noticing really bad boost leak issues, what we can do is we can use JB Weld, and once we put some JB Weld on there, yeah, she's not going to leak then. So let's go ahead and test fit it, make sure the barb fitting lines up good. If it doesn't, then, well crap, we're screwed, but let's just hope it does. So we slide that in, slide our fitting on, and as planned, that fits actually really well. So now let's go ahead and drill and tap our intake air temperature sensor. So we got all the intercooler piping done after we got it bead rolled. We literally just popped it all together and chucked it in and connected it all. And it fits up great. And now with those 90 silicon couplers right there, they did blow up at the track running like 6 PSI, but it was an extremely hot day and I was running it all day. So if you do get one of these cheap eBay kits, I would recommend upgrading at least the 90 pipes to something like this. These are reinforced and way thicker, so these aren't going to blow up. Now, the rest of the silicon couplers I've had no issues with. It was just that 190 that blew up at the track. So if you're planning on running a lot of boost, I would upgrade the silicon couplers. But if it's just a street fun car, then it will be plenty sufficient until it's not and blows up. But for the time being, you'll be fine. But if you guys did learn something from this video or just purely enjoyed it, like, comment, subscribe, all that, it means a lot. And I hope you guys all have a great day. See you guys all next time. Peace out.